Okay, so if I can still recall, I think we stopped somewhere. Hmm, where did we stop, actually? Who plans, is it?
Betul. Dekat the
Betul kan?
contractor.
Oh,
Ah,
okay. All right, good. Okay, so basically when we talk about planning, so just to recap, we have different stakeholders. Okay, so different stakeholders would be interested in different phases of the project. Okay, so for example, if we are talking about the client, obviously the interest of the client is from the beginning until the end. Okay, so from the concept, from inception, and then the market survey. So basically from benda yang tak ada, okay, so at the concept level until the end, handover, and also the usage of the facility. Okay, so the client will look into major milestones lah. Okay, so meaning to say that the client might not be interested to know when you are going to cast column A dengan column B. Is not their interest. Okay, their interest is for that certain phase. Okay, slab will be completed when, column will be completed when. So at a more larger milestone, so not on a very detailed activity to activity. Okay, so you can imagine that clients schedule will be 3D general. Okay, so but encapsulating the milestone from the beginning until the end. So for the designer pula, okay, so basically the plan will be one, the plan of their own resources too. Okay, so at their own organization. And another one is basically the planning for that project. What are the items or what are the elements required before they can come up with the design? Right, so because before they can come up with the contract document though. Okay, so what they need before that, so obviously they need to know the soil condition, they need to know local authorities requirement, legal issues, those things like that. Okay, so the designer would need to do site visit, for example. Okay, so some of the things, so those would require plannings to be done. You can't just jump on the site, okay, and investigate. So there must be proper planning being done. What type of investigation are we talking about? Soil investigation, site investigation. Hold on, ramai pula masuk. Okay, right. So that will be the designer. Okay, so contractor. Okay, so contractor is the one that okay, so contractor is the one whereby when we talk about the planning, there will be two parts that the contractor plans. Okay, one will be during the estimation before tendering. Okay, so or during the tendering in order for them to come up with closely realistic estimated costs. Okay, so one will be at the estimation stage. Another one will be at the production stage. Okay, so estimating will be tendering contractor. Okay, so contractor who wants to tender for the project, dia kena ada timeline because your tender document should be submitted before certain deadline. So there are activities that you need to do before the deadline of the tender. So hence it needs to be planned. And another one is by the winning contractor. Okay, so the contractor who has won over the tender, they need to properly plan their resources and everything for the entire construction. So the most difficult planning, which would require very extensive experience, if you ask me personally, would be the production. Okay, so would be during construction because the planning is where you're talking about so many elements joined together. Okay, so you have architecture coming in, structural, M&E coming in, but you need to know which comes after which. Structure dulu ke, architect dulu ke, M&A dulu ke, or it is together. And even structure, we are talking about, you might be having column here, and then you might be constructing slab there. You can't wait for A to finish, B start, B finish, C start one by one. If you're going to do one by one throughout the construction, it will take forever. So you would have activity whereby you will start together, you start together after a few days. So the sequence of the activity is very important. Okay, but obviously you can't just get it like macam tu. Okay, so obviously sometimes we need to go through several cycles of experience. Okay, so you need to go onto the site and basically see how things are joined together, how elements are being constructed. So you get that by experience. And normally sometimes if you started off as a design engineer, okay, so you are in the design office, it's quite difficult for you to actually imagine, okay, if I draw in such manner, analyze and draw in such manner, how would it look, how would it reflect in on the site? Quite difficult. So that's why to be a very balanced engineer, okay, so to be a good actually designer, you need to at least know, or you have the experience, how it will be built on the site. Kalau tak, sometimes we build, we place the reinforcement bar. Sometimes without thinking that would it be difficult for the contractors on the site to actually assemble? Will that actually create a honeycomb? Okay, so if it's too crowded, for example, but it's needed, but it's too crowded, maybe you might want to enlarge the column just to ensure that the honeycomb will not be produced that badly. Okay, so because sometimes when we design, we don't, we might not really reflect on how it will be constructed. So that's one thing about it lah. So if you have this side experience, on top of that, you know to analyze, then you might come out with a design which is constructible. Okay, so kalau tak, you get quite a lot of requests for information by the contractor. Okay, so well, in terms of the planning, okay, so contractor will have two, one at the estimation phase, one will be at the construction phase. Okay, so next thing is basically general description of construction planning. Okay, so construction planning includes prescription of how each work task is to be performed. Okay, so it's like prescribed procedures. Okay, how work is to be performed. Involve the selection of construction method, related support, and also management procedures. Okay, so the order of which things are to be done. So the order ni, that was what I mentioned just now, the order or the sequence. Okay, so aturan dia. Alright, so which activity comes together, which activities must be done before the following activity starts. So it's very important because wrong arrangement of the activities, wrong connection, and on top of that, you might have wrong assignment given. Okay, so activity B patutnya start 1 week after. But from your arrangement, if it's wrong, then your subcon masuk minggu ni. So you will create chaotic situation. So it's very important to understand the sequence to the order, which comes after which. All right. So, and I've mentioned this, it comes along with the experience. So you might not be able to imagine how M&E comes along with construction together. But once you get the idea, when you go onto the site, you see how it is assembled, then you'll be able to know that, oh, okay, so when we're talking about embedded, then M&E installed together with the reinforcement bar, concreted together, for example. Okay. So it requires understanding of the processes in the construction method. Okay, so decisions as to when things to be done. Okay, so these decisions on a desirable sequence are pertinent to the attainment of the recognizable work progress. Okay, all right. So the processes basically, okay, so several levels of planning. So one is called project planning. So this one we have talked about it just now, basically, last week. Okay, so a little bit, but when we put it in name manner, so then this is the name. Okay, so the planning done by client is basically project planning. Okay, so project manager here means the project manager that represents the client, not contractor. Okay, so the project manager that represents the client or a project manager that works for the client's organization, right? So because developers office, they have their own project manager, right? So this is called project planning. Pre-tender planning is basically by the tendering contractor. Okay, so in order to attain the most realistic and the estimation, close estimation of costing for the contract. Pre-contract planning is by the main contractor. Okay, so pre-contract planning is basically from the time the contractor won the tender before construction. Okay, so there is a very short time frame from the time the contractor has been awarded the contract and before it starts the job on the site. So more or less 2 weeks for site possession, for example. So, but there are a lot of things to be done, to be prepared before you jump on to the site and just conduct the activities. Okay, and contract planning is from the time you occupy the site until closure. Okay, so until handover. So that will be done by main contractor with the support from subcontractor. Okay, so you have project planning by the client, pre-tender planning by the tendering contractor, pre-contract planning by the main contractor who won over the contract. Okay, so and contract planning by main and subcontractor. Okay, so when we talk about project planning, it is being developed by the client's team. Okay, so normally the project manager working for the client, right? So this is where you have the master schedule of the project. And these are some of the items which you might want to include in project planning. Okay, so for example, key date to start and also complete the project. Okay, so you should have the idea of when your project is supposed to start and end. Key dates for the design, tender, construction, or basically any major milestone. Okay, so if you have a major milestone such as market survey, for example, then that will also be included. Okay, because for the client, it is beginning very much earlier, right? Land possession. Okay, so if you're gonna change the ownership of the land, so those are the things, the major milestones that to be completed before you start on the design, for example. So you would have major milestone listed by the client and the key dates. Okay, so the start and end date. Okay, so project planning is where you have the overall program, overall phasing, design, tender periods, main date for the construction, the start and end date for construction, and stage and phase handover dates. Okay, so basically when we talk about project planning, it is major milestone and the dates that we need to know. Okay, and why do we need to have project planning, which is basically done by the client to ensure that we establish a realistic master schedule. Okay, so so that you basically have the timeline to actually appoint consultant, appoint the contractor. Okay, so commission the occupancy phase of the scheme. So basically, the idea is for the client to have a realistic milestone. Sometimes words are just words, but when you put in sequence, when you put in realistic with your resources you have in hand, boleh ke tak? Okay, so because when you put in realistic and you can see the time is not as expected, then that should not be the project planning and that should not be expected by the contractor kemudian. Okay, so the client should first have this realistic project planning. Once it's okay, then you can pass on with the other phases of getting the designers and contractors and so on. Okay, so to identify key dates at critical stages of the project. So normally once we place in the activities, we come up with the network diagram. You should be able to find critical activities, okay, and also critical stages. So you'll be able to see that there are certain activities which are pretty critical and you need to actually stress on that, okay. And project planning basically to facilitate control of the design and tendering process so that it is within the time frame that has been drafted, to identify potential risks to progress and avoid possible delays to project completion, okay, and to monitor actual, and also if there are any deviation, you take corrective action. Okay, so these are several reasons for clients to have project planning. Okay, so the next one is pre-tender planning. So pre-tender planning is by the tendering contractor. Okay, so this is where contractors consideration is taken to prepare the estimate bid, changing it to a commercial bid. Okay, so it's important that the contractor actually kind of focus in coming up with this so that nilai bid tu tak salah. Okay, so if the contractor does not emphasize or does not what they call fully consider this phase and fully come up with the bid which is close to realistic, then whatever price you put in there, that will be the pricing. If it's too low, there's no way you can challenge it because you place the bid. Okay, so if it's agreed upon and you have been selected as the winning contractor in the next phase, then you will have problem if the bid is too low and it is unrealistic. So that is why it will come into picture maybe less, what do we call it, less quality materials and so on, because the bid was too low. Okay, and it's not all the time that the client would select the lowest bid. Okay, so it is not necessary. For government project as well, they have this estimated bid by the QS themselves. Okay, QS that works for the client, they normally have estimated bid, and normally you would be chosen if you are within maybe plus minus 10 to 15% of the from the lower from the bid that has been estimated. Okay, so usually let's say JKR. So if you have estimated bid, the QS have come out with the estimated bid, JKR maybe is 10 million. Okay, so you would actually look into a bid which is plus minus 10 to 15% of 10 million and lower plus minus 10 to 15% of the 10 million. Okay, so you will see 10% up, 10% low to see which contractor actually is worth the contract. Okay, so but obviously price is not only the reason. There are other reasons to actually what you call factor in to select a contractor. Okay, all right, so since it's afternoon, I'll ask you a question. Okay, so what are the other factors that you will look into when you select a contractor besides the bid pricing? What are the other characteristics or other factors that we see when we select contractors for a certain project? Any idea? Selain daripada nilai. So we will look into the pricing. Okay, but other than that, what criteria would you look into when you are selecting a contractor?
Experience.
Experience, okay, if they have conducted similar projects. So obviously experience as well, you will check on whether how did they complete the project. Let's say it's a school project or maybe commercial area project. a successful project ke, delay ke, how long it was delayed. So you need to check on that experience as well as their performance lah, basically. Okay, so previous performance. Lagi, what else would you check? What else would you check? Sometimes that's why sometimes it's very important because sometimes in you can see reports stating that such organization does not have the experience for those type of project tapi diberikan tender. So there are some, obviously, there are misconducts, malpractices in the industry and so on. But please, if you are holding that position, there you are given that amanah to carry out a certain task, please make sure you carry it out ethically. Okay, so make sure that your decision, it is informed. Okay, so that's very important. Your decision is fully informed, you know, and you understand, and you basically decide based on factors, given factors, and not based on other things. Okay, so because you are given that responsibility, so if anything happens to the project in future, tak siap ataupun incomplete, or worst case from that defect and accidents happen, it will be on you. Okay, so make sure that when you are in a position, given the position, to make a certain decision, make sure you do it with full professionalism and ethically. That's very important. Okay, so because sometimes, people in position, you might be given, might be influenced. Okay, so in the industry, you'll see that, it could be influenced in any way, but please make sure that you do not easily get influenced. Okay, so make sure that you make a decision too is informed. You have a reasoning for each of the decision. Why did you make that? Why did you make that? And it is fully justified. Then it's fine. Okay, so normally if we make a decision based on we look at the factors, we know the reasoning we take in, which is based on really objective assessment. Dia tak ada, I mean, people susah nak cari salah. Okay, so because you have to be careful, because when you are working, there are a lot of challenges. Okay, there are a lot of temptation, there are a lot of challenges, so you have to have those self-control though, very important. Okay, right, so that is just selingan a bit, just to ensure that you guys be an engineer, be a ethically responsible professional engineer one day. Okay, all right, so coming back here, basically we are talking just now mentioned about experience. Lagi apa lagi? What else do you look into before you actually grant a contractor contract to?
Kalau background syarikat kontraktor tu?
Background, okay, background, make sure that if it's construction lah, sometimes construction, but you provide the contract kepada maybe computer supplier. Yes, the background, the nature of the business sebelum tu lah. Okay, so almost similar to experience. Cuma experience, we are talking about similar project, but background is very, of course, that's the main thing. If a contractor comes in, but they supply computer, is something not right. If your tender is about building a school, okay, or building a computer lab, okay, constructing a computer lab, but the contract yang come in, or the tender yang come in is about computer supply, dia dua benda yang berbeza. Unless you open the tender for computer supply, IT supply, then it's okay. So the background is also very important. Betul? Okay, lagi? What else do you look at? Background, experience, performance. Do you look into the current capital they have? Current capital or current equipment that they own? Penting ke? Or doesn't matter how much the company is having in hand?
Penting juga yang tu.
So you need to also know the company too, are they able to sustain themselves? Are they able to roll the money before they get the payment by from the client? Okay, so they can't just straight away dapat duit from the client. So normally there will be a time period whereby, especially at the front end, you need to buy in all the supply. Okay, so you need to actually invest. You have some monetary to keluarkan dulu. Okay, so you need to invest. You need to buy in certain material to ensure the site layout started first. So those are the things you need to actually pay. Kalau the company with a very minimum capital that is almost impossible to make any payment, then how do you expect the company to actually start the project? Okay, so that's also important. And also their machinery they have in hand. So that is also important. Okay, so you need to know workers, if they have any workers, how many engineers in the company. So those are the things which are important. So let's say satu je engineer, tapi it's a huge project. So how would that be done? So hire waktu tu ke? So there are some questions about resources. Okay, here whether it's human resource ataupun machinery ataupun monetary as well. Okay, so you need to also look into the capacity of the organisation. Sama ada boleh ke capable or not to actually handle that project. Okay. Ada tak apa lagi? Any others? You might also want to check if there are having any other projects in hand. Okay, so sometimes when they bid for project, dia bukan bid satu je. Okay, so they might have several projects in hand, and then they bid for another project lagi, so they have like a couple of projects in hand. So you need to check if there are other projects in hand, what are their current status. Baru nak start ke? Almost completing. So to ensure that your project will not be side case that, and also need to check on the project in hand tu performance macam mana. Okay, so are they already delay? If you come in, I'm not sure how it will be managed. If they have other project and they are performing just nice, then it is okay. So a lot of things sebenarnya. So it's not only one aspect of cost and then okay, this is the contractor. When you are trying to come up with a decision, it is quite of a different nature or different factors that you need to take into account lah. Okay. All right. So pre-tender program produced by the contractors. Okay. So basically this one is for tendering contractor. So the time period tak lama. Okay, so as the time frame of the tender opening. Okay, so this is to ensure apa tu, to assist the tendering process and to ensure the estimator to put in the price. So estimator di sini normally QS who has been hired by the contractor, or basically if normally during the tender document might be just the engineer working for the contractor. Okay, so you yourself might be one of the days doing this estimation task. Okay, so if you're working for a contractor, small firm contractor, normally you will be also the estimator. Okay, so the elements for us to look into during the pre-tender planning is where we have site visit. You need to do this. Sometimes the client would have the site visit open. Okay, so open site visit, they will bring the potential contractors to the site, have a look on the site and so on. Kalau the client did not bring or did not organize such site visit, then the initiative should be done by the contractor just to know how it looks like. You can get it from Google, okay, so Google Earth ataupun GIS, you can get those, but I think having a site visit also would be helpful. At least you know what are the landmarks and how it could actually affect your access and so on. When you go on, you will be able to see that, okay, potentially access to the site kat mana, ingress from the site kat mana. So because your traffic control is very important, especially you're in urban area. In suburban outskirt, then might not be a big issue lah. Tapi if you're talking about city center and your site is particularly memang maybe a project of refurbishment, okay, then it will be quite critical. Okay, especially on changing the routes, traffic control of things like that lah. Okay, but other than that, basically, if you're talking about urban, suburban, whatsoever, you need to also know the utilities available. Okay, kalau urban, not a big issue. Tapi if you're talking about rural areas, okay, so where would be the closest water and electricity supply? Okay, so that you need to do and so on. So site visit is important to ensure that you know what you are dealing with, especially in regards to the surrounding. Okay, so and also the land area. Okay, so whether it is hilly, well, so those are the things. Is it near to the water resource and so on? Okay. Okay, next, basically, you need to know the rate of the material. Okay, so you can't expect the material price to be the same over the years. Tak boleh. So material price fluctuates, especially when we are having this COVID, shortage of materials, supply tak boleh sampai, factory tutup. It creates chaos. Okay, so and foreign exchange, if your currency goes very low, okay, and the materials are in need for you to import, you have to pay so for construction, the prices fluctuate. So important for you to know what is the current. You can't expect 10 years ago, the pricing still remains the same. Okay. All right. So work method statement. Okay, so what are the ways for us to conduct a certain what do you call activity? For example, simple is basically concreting. Okay, there are various ways for us to do concreting. Whether do we want to have our own batching plant, because a lot of organizations, if it is a big project, they just hire the whole batching plant. Okay, so that the distance untuk the concrete truck untuk sampai, dia tak perlu keluar from site. Okay, so if it involve huge volume of concrete, okay, but if it's not, it is just simple structure which you think might not require huge volume on the site, then might as well. And there are near batching, batching plants. So then it could be using concrete truck je lah. Okay, so time planning as well. Okay, so with your resources and all of those in hand, how realistic your time could be. Okay, so and decide on the financial resources as well. Okay. Right. So when we are coming up with the pre-tender planning, these are the reasons why we came up with it. Okay, to make sure that the contract period is realistic, to make sure that we can identify the construction method. Okay, so how each method could affect the pricing. So of course, when we are talking about batching plant and also our reliance on concrete truck, the pricing would differ. Okay, so that's why when we are looking into the option of several methods, we need to see which pricing would actually make most sense to us lah. Okay, would be economically viable for us. Okay, so to aid the build up of the contract prelim and also plan expenditure. And the most important when we talk about pre-tender is to aid the tendering process. Okay, so to aid the estimation process. Okay, so the next one is basically pre-tender planning. Okay, so pre-contract planning. So pre-contract planning is a very short time frame from the time you won over the contract and before this start the work on the site. So you can imagine it can be 2 weeks, okay, if it's given that the contractor must occupy the site within 14 days. Then it will be 2 weeks. So depending on how long it is given by the client. Okay, so from the time you won over the contract before you start the work on the site. So this one is what we call contract master program. Okay, so part of this or copies of this program or this planning will be sent to the client. Okay, so they will use this to monitor your progress. And then moving forward, you would have target program. Okay, so target program is basically a compressed version of this. So normally as a contractor, you will give one copy of the contract master program to the client. Okay, so that will be the one the client would base on when they are looking into your performance every month. Okay, so more general. But as a contractor, if you just rely on that, you do not have any buffer. Silap kat sana, or basically you will be giving or you will be conducting your job based on what the client sees. Normally, the contractor would have a more compressed version. Okay, so compressed version is where you will shorten the time that you have listed it for the client. So for example, there is one activity that in the client's planning is given a month, but when you try to plan it on the site, maybe you break it down to 3 weeks. Okay, so you compress it. If anything goes wrong, you still have that 1 week of buffer. Okay, so target program or compressed version. So normally a contractor would have 1 week a more tighter timeline so that if apa jadi, masih ada that buffer lagi. Okay, so they will try to work using this compressed version. Okay, so the compressed version will be the internal program and it will be more detailed. Okay, so there are some activities which column A to column B concreting, the client might not need to know that. Okay, so pre-contract planning. Okay, so this is where you will provide outline plan or strategy for the project. The contractor. Okay, so the contractor, once you have won over the tender or you have won over the contract, you will need to know how you can complete the project within the time frame that has been given in the contract. Okay, so you need to lay out the strategy. And then you will need to comply with the contract condition. So if you can recall, I did touch about contract condition in the last class, if I'm not mistaken, about JKR 203, 203A, okay, so PAM document or CIDB. So condition of contract is one document in the contract document. Okay, so that are the rules of this contract. Tak boleh. Dia kena ada condition. If, for example, if you break the condition, for example, if you have delayed the project, okay, what will happen to you? Okay, so that is the condition in the contract. If you have delayed and you have reasoning for it, can you use that reason to actually apply for extension? That should be in the contract as well. Okay, so contract condition, it sets the condition lah. Okay, so in such situation, what you can have and so on. Who will be the superintending officer? So that will be in the contract. So once a contractor gets the contract, while they are planning, they need to check on the contract condition. Because if they ambil sambil level what is given in the contract condition, if they write delay, they want to apply for extension, rupa-rupanya in the contract does not allow such reasoning for the delay, then the contractor is in trouble. Okay, so for example, on COVID, okay, so in the contract might not have written anything on COVID. Okay, so but obviously COVID has caused delay to many projects. Okay, pretty much all construction projects might have gone through some certain delay because of COVID. So reference should be given in the contract condition. Boleh ke the extension of time provided to the contractor because of COVID? Okay, so this should be read. If there are no COVID, what clause can be used to actually say that, okay, this situation is not caused by the contractor. It is caused by force majeure. Okay, so there are external factors that actually cause the delay. So it's important. So hence the contractor sebenarnya they sign the document tebal though, they have to actually understand what the condition allow or do not allow them to do. Okay, so obviously once you have won over the contract, you need to know the strategy, you need to know what needs to be done. So you need to establish the construction sequence, what comes after another, and what subcontractor, what supplier, what material would come when. So you can see that actually pre-contract is pretty comprehensive lah, dia punya planning. It's quite complex, comprehensive. Okay. So you identify key project dates. Okay, so key information requirement. You will be able to assessment of contract budget and cumulative value forecast. So this one we will actually do this in chapter 4 ni towards the end. Okay, so you know what is cumulative value forecast. Actually, have you heard of S-curve before? S-curve? Pernah dengar S-curve tak? Have you? Have you not?
Ada
No.
No, okay. So actually cumulative value forecast for those of you who have heard, then is good. It's basically the baseline for us to look into the performance, especially the client. Because you can have like tons, a lot of Gantt chart, network analysis yang complex. Ultimately, it will be formed in the form of S-curve. You can have all these activities tambah tolak with all the sequencing, with all the lag and complicated relationship. At the end of the day, those will be produced in the form of Gantt chart. And from your Gantt chart, it will produce in the form of S-curve to tell you, okay, this is how your project would be in accordance to the period. Okay, so S-curve is where in a progress meeting, client contractor meeting or client consultant contractor meeting, this is the one they see. Okay, so this is where that we can actually see whether the project is on time, behind schedule and so on. Okay, so but this one we'll touch on when we go on later in the calculation part. Okay, so we'll come back to S-curve ni. So it's in simple manner, it is a progress monitoring chart. Okay, so you have the baseline S-curve, you have the actual S-curve. So you can see how actually your project is progressing. In another word, it's called cumulative value forecast. So you will see that we will have cumulative using value forecast ni, you will be able to see that you have a time frame and how cumulative value is predicted there. Okay, but anyhow, once we go on to producing our own S-curve, you'll be able to see. Okay. All right, so next to schedule key dates with respect to the material and also subcontractor requirement. Okay, so that is the pre-contract. And elements to look into this, walaupun the timeline pendek, okay, so you're talking about very short time period, but quite a lot you need to do. So you need to look into the detailed work program. Okay, so you can use a critical path method. You can use precedence diagram. So CPM, precedence, we'll talk about it in classes to come. Okay, so obviously at the front end, you need to prepare insurance. You need to have the intake of foreman if you require. But if no, normally as a main contractor, normally you will do certain part of the activities. Okay, so normally concreting work, for example, so you would have like a certain workers to conduct certain activity. Not all. I don't, it's quite difficult or rarely that we can see that main contractor boleh buat plumbing, mechanical, structural, architectural. No, normally it will be subcon lah, but maybe they will cover one or two activities with the limited workers that they have. Okay. And here also you might want to call in a tender for specialized jobs. Okay, so especially for example, leave system and M&E system. Okay, so specialized jobs. Prepare material suppliers for it at this front end. You hire staff based on site. Okay, so this is also very important because normally you would have project engineers, site supervisors for a new project. You need to also have a site clerk. Okay, so sometimes people look how to say, take for granted. Okay, so site clerk. Tapi sebenarnya very important because your drawings, your request for information, your information coming in, information going out, benda tu very important because if let's say one fine day something happen, if let's say the structure collapse, you need all the documentation to ensure that you are guarded. Okay, so that's very important. If you have a site clerk, tapi the RFI was not recorded, you have make a decision on the site based on the recommendation from the consultant, tapi not recorded. If let's say something happen in future, you can prove that it comes from the contractor, consultant. Okay, so the how to say, the communication management on the site is very important. So you need to have at least site clerk, at least to know filing and so on. Okay. All right. So next at the pre-contract planning, you need to know obviously the local authorities. Okay, at the locality that your project is located. Prepare work capital, okay, because at this point you will have some expenditures to be done. Prepare equipment, and of course at this point of time is where you need to at least make sure that the site, the borders and so on. Okay, so prepare equipment, plans, design of temporary structures. Okay, so at the front end, before you look into scaffolding dan sebagainya, your temporary structure might be temporary drainage, okay, the hoarding, okay, so your boundary of the site, the hoarding, you need to cover up the site. Normally they start clearance sikit and cover up the site, okay, so workers quarters, those are the things lah. Okay, so temporary structures. Temporary road, okay, so temporary drainage, sediment pond, so you need to know where you need to halakan the sediment, apa tu, the, what do you call surface runoff tu. Okay, so you need to, especially when you have heavy rain dan sebagainya. Okay, so the final planning is basically contract planning. Contract planning is basically from the time you possess the site possession until completion. Basically until defect liability period. So defect liability period is whereby the site has completed and basically the contractor might remain with very minimal jobs, maybe just planting grass or very minimal architectural work. Okay, so defect liability period is like the warranty. Okay, so this period is usually 1 year. Okay, so usually in the contract is given 1 year lah. So basically 1 year warranty. If there are anything wrong with your house, you can complain to the client and the contractor will come in to fix it for free. Right, so defect liability period. So for contract planning, master program will be further developed. Okay, so there will be short-term program, weekly or fortnightly. So as a contractor, you can't be carrying around your planning of 6 months, 1 year. So you will break down your master program into smaller duration. It's important to ensure that you can actually provide the task to the workers at the very short time period. Okay, if you have a planning of a month or 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, without having a short time period, how do you know what to tell the workers? Okay, so you kind of need to break it down into weekly tasks, fortnightly tasks to ensure that the instructions are pretty clear and you know what to dictate to the workers, what to do when. All right, so and also when you have this short time, it's easier for you to measure the performance. Okay, so you know within this 1 week, I need to complete how many meters square of the slab. I need to complete how many column concreting and so on. So it will be much easier for you to measure. Ada benda ni, you are at the surface level a month. If anything goes wrong, it's quite difficult for you to monitor. Okay. So it's done by main contractor. Okay, so obviously this is to ensure that you monitor and you can control the site. Okay, you can control the progress. You may get your subcontractor to contribute as well, submitting their work program. And if delay happens, then your changes will be recorded in a revised program. Okay, so we call it as-built program. So even in drawing, we have something called as-built drawing. Okay, so as-built in construction is basically meaning what has been done in real. Okay, so for example, as-built drawing is whereby what has been constructed on the site. Because sometimes what the drawing given by the designer might not be constructed on the site accurately because there are certain changes, there are certain diversions required. Okay, so if that is the case, you need to reflect the diversion that has been made in a drawing. That is what we call as-built. Present it what as-built. So why do we need as-built program or as-built drawing? Why do we need to prepare that and submit it to the client? Why as-built is important in construction? Pernah dengar tak as-built ni? Hello, anyone there?
Set of drawing
Yes,
that are
madam.
marked.
So why do you think as-built is important? Okay, if we don't provide as-built, okay, okay, for example, okay, so let's say for a construction site, right? Okay, so we have TNB cable running under our site, okay, and we need to divert that, and in the consultant's drawing, it was not given so. In the construction, the drawing, we should run above the TNB cable. Tapi on the site, we realize that there is such cable. So we can't just run over it, and we need to divert so that we do not actually encounter with the TNB cable. So hence, if we don't have the S-build, the client would not know where we actually diverted those structure of ours. Okay, S-build is important so that the client actually know where we have placed certain element, especially the elements which are embedded in the ground. Okay, so your sewage drain or your TNB cable, if you have any diversion than what has been given in the consultant drawing, you need to highlight that in the as-built drawing, so that if there are future maintenance to be done or there are future developments to be done, they know that there is a TNB cable. If you tak cakap, if let's say we take the original drawing, and someone would have dug on that TNB cable that we have diverted, habis. So that's why it's very important. S-build is to showcase what we have done on the site or what we have changed. Dia tak salah untuk change. So, but you need to report the changes so that someone else is going to take over, aware of the changes. If you just tak buat that and just rely on the original, then it will be huge problem. So it might happen accident yang people tak tahu. So you have diverted that. So it's very important in construction, especially if there are changes to the original document too. Okay. All right. So in the contract planning, basically this is where you are executing, you are constructing. Okay. So you will start the activity as planned. You can monitor the progress each week. Okay, so in terms of how much cost you have spent, the time, the quantity, and also you can compare the current progress to the standard ones. Okay, so to the baseline S-curve that you have actually come up with. So monitoring ni depends. Some would monitor daily, some would monitor a week, some monitor a month. I think is dah tak kira monitor lah. So a month is actually too far. Okay, so the closer or the shorter the duration you monitor, the better, so that if there are any problem, you can fix it there and there itself. Okay, if it's too long, dia factor tu dah bercampur aduk. Okay, so it can be factor because worker, suddenly it's because of machine, suddenly it's because of material. You can't even differentiate which was the initial problem. Okay, so a shorter period would make you see in a more clearer manner, okay, actually what is the problem if there are certain delay. Okay. Prepare daily, weekly, monthly report. Okay, so this is where you control your resources, you control your quality based on specification. Okay, so this one I think I've highlighted at the front end of our lecture. Okay, so to actually control the quality based on specification for engineer or for consultant, usually they have representative on the site. We call it resident engineer, okay, and representative of the architect. We have clerk of work juga. Okay, so those are the people who actually check on the drawing to ensure that you have placed in the right amount, the right, for example, reinforcement, okay, the right lapping, the right reinforcement bar size, semua tu. Okay, so that will be by the resident engineer. Once the reinforcement bar place are correct, lap is correct, and the cover is the size that is being required, then you are allowed to concrete the column ke, beam ke, and so on. Okay, and for architect is also the same. The brick, okay, so for example, simply at the bathroom, okay, so there should be a certain slope so that the water will be flowing into the drainage system. So benda tu need to be checked by the clerk of work lah. Okay, so if there are certain slope, tak adalah mendata je, then your bathroom each time mandi tu penuh je air. Okay, so there should be a certain slope. So those are the things that might be checked by the clerk of work, for example, that represents the architect. Okay. And then coordination, discussion between the parties. Okay, so contract administration, especially if there are any delays or variation order. Okay, so I think this one point I've discussed in the last class. Especially if you have, especially when the contractor comes, into view that there are work which are not given in the contract. Okay, so but needs to be done. So that will be additional work and there will be additional costs the client have to bear. To call it variation order. Okay. So, and here is also where the work needs to be conducted safely. Correction action taken if there are any problem. Okay, progress claim being made normally in a monthly manner. Okay, so this is where also back to the client, it's important that the client notes that every month bila payment should be given to the contractor. So both parties. So one claim, one should actually note that that is the time where whereby payment should be given. Okay, payment to the supplier. So once they actually attain the payment from the client, biasanya they will do the payment to the supplier. So that's why when the client does not provide the payment, itu yang the problem would cascade macam tu. Okay, so slowly the supplier will not be paid, subcon not paid. The client's calendar. Okay, and activities during project close down. Okay, so the reasonings for us to have contract planning will be to monitor the master plan in a shorter time period. Okay, so you can break down into a smaller duration so that it is easier for you to monitor. Okay, so to plan in detail in short time manner, to optimize, review the resources, and to keep the project under review and report on any variance. Okay. All right, so far any question? Okay, if there are no question, maybe we have a 5 minutes break and then we continue balik. Tak banyak lagi. I think, yeah, so other than that will be just a brief introduction or briefly on planning. So maybe we have a 5-minute break and then we continue balik. Tak apa. Okay, kalau macam tu kita continue balik our lecture and let's see, maybe just a few more lah. Okay. All right. So, all right. For us to plan a project, okay. So, generally, these are several steps that we follow lah. Okay. So, you get a feel for the project. Feel to depends lah. If you have been assigned a project, then you just have to do it. Especially if you are working for people. But if you are the boss of the project, then you boleh lah dapat feel dulu. But anyhow, so basically, realizing that you have the task in hand lah. Okay, so you have the task in hand for a certain project, then you establish key project dates. Let me check. Ada continue. Oh, sorry, I have not shared there. Patutlah. Okay, so we are here basically planning a project. Okay. So getting a feel for the project or realizing that you have a project and you have been tasked with a project. So basically that is that. Okay. So once you have that, obviously you need to come up with the key dates. Okay. So key activities and you need to assess how long it takes to complete. All right. So you have the activities, you have the date. How do we know how long we take to complete? So that is quite a tricky question. So that depends on the resource you have in hand. And how long with that resource, how long will it take to complete? So for example, if we are talking about earthwork activities, so obviously if you're only having 2 excavators, obviously your duration will be longer as compared to someone who is having 5 excavators. So the duration obviously depends on the resources you have in hand, your machineries you have in hand, and also normally how long it takes. Okay, so usually this also comes along with experience. Okay, so normally someone with experience will say that, okay, on a daily basis, a truck could, how many times a truck could actually what do you call would be required to carry how many meter cube, so more or less. So sequence and the duration, how long it takes, usually relies quite a lot on experience. But I think overseas, okay, so countries, there are countries who actually came up with like a indicator. Okay, so to concrete a certain meter square of slab, with how many people, it requires how long. So there are some notations as such. To concrete column as such, how long will it take? Okay, so unless you can get yourself into that, even with that, it's quite difficult as well because the human resource will be different. Okay, if you place probably Indonesian worker as compared to Bangladesh worker doing concreting work, you might get a different result. Okay, so um, not that easy for us to actually dictate that, confirm one day boleh siap or confirm a certain date. So that's why it is pretty much, when we are talking about the duration, more or less estimated duration that it could be completed. Okay, because different set of workers, even nationality of workers who are different, actually could provide you a duration which differs actually. Okay, so estimated duration. Okay, and then establish the sequence of the activities and decide which programming technique to be used. Okay, programming technique ni yang we mentioned here will be normally like CPM, critical path method, or precedence diagram, and so on. Okay, so benefits of planning, I wouldn't go detail. Okay, so obviously, but the benefits are pretty straightforward lah. Okay, so if you have a plan, then obviously it will be coordinated. Okay, and everyone. The worst is when you are leading and you can't provide the right information to the members. Okay, you can't direct them. Okay, today you have to do this. That is the hard part of being the leader. Because you have to think beforehand, you have to know what needs to be done, and you need to assign it to the right person. So it's not easy to be a leader because you have to think double of what the workers or the members will be doing. Okay, they just need to do. But you need to ensure that what you have coordinated sebenarnya makes sense. Okay, so wrong coordination, wrong direction, it will be chaotic. Okay, so obviously when you plan properly, you can come up with that. You will reduce overlap, you will reduce wasteful activities, especially when you assign similar job, overlapping, double handling. That is the things that we want to eliminate. Okay, so try your best to do things once rather than there are other overlapping movement, double handling material, dah letak sana, you want to move it there, so you double handle things. Okay, so those are some of the things that you need to reduce. Okay, so obviously when you have a plan, you basically reduce the risk, you reduce uncertainty because you have laid out everything. You have laid out the plan, the strategy, And with that, you'll be able to see what could potentially go wrong. Because you have already known subcontractor mana yang perlu masuk, mana yang masuk kemudian, and then which supplier would come in and what could go wrong. So you should be able to anticipate if anything were to go wrong actually. Okay. You'll be able to derive the procedures to work effectively. Okay, so you would have adequate standard of performance, and there is a structural way to conduct the work too. Okay, obviously when you have proper site planning, okay, so either non-productive time is eliminated and excess labor could be shown right away. Okay, so when you have proper site plan, you should not have equipment either menunggu je. Okay, so imagine that daily you are paying a few hundred for a certain machinery, a few hundred, easily 400-500 rental daily. And also belum tambah with the salary, the wages of the skilled worker. And they're on the site tapi the job is not ready, so they have to wait. So benda tu either for nothing lah, so you'll be paying for nothing and they will be also on the site doing nothing, so non-productive time. So proper planning would ensure you that dia tak ada something like that. Okay, so that they come in, they do the job and that's it, they're done with that. Tak ada waiting and waiting around doing nothing. Okay, and obviously at the same time, you could also identify the difficulties, the shortages. Okay, so you will also be able to identify what could be the challenges. Okay, so if you arrange it properly, you'll be able to get feedback from the supplier, subcontractor, apa yang kurang. Okay, so that. And then management is able to relate what has been done, what should be done. Basically, you have a proper monitoring system in place. And okay, so utilization of labor, plant, and material. Okay, so there are several kinds of planning that you can do. Okay, so you can plan your resources, you can plan your equipment, time cost, and also site layout. Okay, so the proper planning of resources basically are the planning of the workers, the arrangement of the laborer, plant operator, site supervisor, and so on. Normally, okay, so on the construction site, we have something called daily report. Okay, so site plan lah, site report, basically daily report. And normally in the daily report, usually we will input in the skilled workers especially. Okay, the engineers. Okay, so normally we'll input, okay, project manager berapa, attendance on the site. Okay, so engineers berapa orang, skilled workers. Okay, so plant operator berapa orang, site supervisor berapa orang. Normally laborers tak. So normally we don't count the laborers. Okay, bar vendor ada 5 orang, concreter no. Normally the key person kat sana, it will be recorded on the site so that we know that, okay, let's say if the delay happens during this time, or if there are material undelivered this time, so we know who might be in charge or whether there are any superintending officers in charge at the point of time. Okay, so arrangement of these workers, arrangement of this assignment. Okay, so when you plan for resources, no one should be kept idle. So it's very important. Sometimes bila on the site, you can actually see, nothing is being done by anyone. So it's just idle. So it's very important for you to check also, because rest is one thing. Okay, so if there are rest time is one thing, but if it is idle for a very long time, so something is not right. Okay, because every second, every minute is basically money. So you need to actually check on any idle system, especially if equipment idle for nothing though. Okay, so supervision is important. Okay. Right. So site layout is what I've mentioned just now. Okay. So site layout is how you arrange the site to be. Okay. So during construction, you need to ensure the access. You need to ensure egress. Access is very important, especially for truck yang besar. Okay. So if you need a truck to U-turn and so on, maybe it's not proper. So your access should be allowing the truck to make a turn and keluar smoothly. Okay, so or the entrance at the front and egress at the back. So a site layout is important so that the material delivery will not be chaotic, especially if you're talking about reinforcement bar, precast elements yang might require huge vehicles going on your site. Okay. So badly planned site layout may cause congestion. Okay, so it may also cause health hazard to workers and so on. Parking lot. Okay, so temporary parking lot. It should be close by the site office, and normally site office to allocation normally is near the access lah. Tak adalah hujung site tu your site office. So normally to ensure that easy for the consultant, easy for the client to go on to the site with less potential of accidents and so on. Okay, so they masuk right to the site office. So normally it should not be far from the front. Apa tu access tu? Okay, so your site layout may include temporary buildings. Okay, so temporary buildings here basically could mean workers' quarters. Okay, so canteen. What else? Site office lah. Site office. So those are basically temporary buildings. You should have also material storage area. Okay, so that if there are any materials, especially cement macam tu, it needs to be staged. Okay, so it needs to be above the ground level so that tak basah dan sebagainya. You should also include temporary roads. Okay, so access roads, hard steading for material, okay, and access sundry points and so on. So it's important to make sure site is accessible all the time so that production can run smoothly. But obviously you need to have it is guarded lah at the front end of the site tu. Okay, tak adalah sesiapa je boleh masuk. Okay, so the next part is basically introduction to scheduling. So this one I'll go very fast because it is part of the coming lecture actually. Okay, so a schedule is operating. So once we have done the planning, okay, so we have identified the activities. Your next step into putting the plan into action, it is through a schedule. If you have plan, you have activities, but you don't have a timeline to it, then the plan is like macam angan-angan je. Okay, you have something, I will reach there someday. Tapi someday tu bila entah. Alright, so you need to make sure that you have a time allocated into the activities, and it would be named as schedule. Okay, so schedule is an operating timetable for you to monitor. All right, so without the time, just the activities is very difficult for you to know. Monitor, you don't know when is the start, when is the end. It is just soon. Soon too can be soon lah. Okay, so it can be so long. Okay, so the basic approach is to form network diagram. So this one we talk into it in the next class basically. Okay, so we'll talk about network diagram. We'll talk about relationship. We'll talk about how activities are joined through a network and in a sequential manner. Okay, so graphically portrayed. Okay, so benefits of a schedule, basically these are this. Okay, so while we go on to the schedule, nanti you will be able to see that when we have a schedule, we can identify the relationship between the activities. So you would know which activity depend on which activity needs to complete sebelum the next activity were to start. Okay, so the interdependence. And then you'll be able to identify when the resources should be made available. Okay, so all of this should be able to communicate, facilitate communication. You'll be able to see that you can identify critical activities, manage those activities, and the client's expectations are basically achieved. Okay, so in scheduling, basically, we will start with having a work breakdown structure. Okay, so I'll discuss this in the next class. I think scheduling will be another part of it. Okay, so I think for schedule, I will come back in the next class because work breakdown is one topic by itself, basically. Okay, so the sequence control. Okay, I rasa we can stop there lah, so that we can continue in the next class on this, more or less on the schedule. Okay, all right. So far, any question for today's class? Tak ada soalan ke? Okay. Tomorrow we will not be meeting tomorrow. Actually, tomorrow I'm having this this thing. So I'll be like the whole day emceeing this thing. Any question that you have for the test? So the test will be objective, as I mentioned, 50 questions. You are given 2 hours, actually lama lah. So you just need to read the question carefully, take your time, read into all the alternatives. Okay, so if you are given 4 answers to read all, evaluate properly. Okay, so sudah kot objective questions. Okay.
Soalan tu, soalan tu 1 markah ke ada yang 2 markah atau 3?
Soalan tu fix 2 markah. So 50 questions times 2, your markah should be 100 lah. Okay, so that will be 20% of your carrying mark. Okay, so make sure that you read the question carefully. Kalau ada accept, kalau ada tu, so read it carefully and read the options for the answers carefully. Okay, so I rasa 2 hours is pretty long untuk 50. So don't jump into answering it. Okay, so if there are no other questions, I think we can stop the class for today. I think I'll see you all terus masa test tu I think.
Madam,
Yeah.
what chapter that coming for the test?
Chapter 1, Introduction to Management. Okay, so chapter 1 ada 2 parts kan? Okay, so chapter 1, Introduction to Management yang general. Okay, talking about the skills, talking about management level, talking about functions of management. So that part of chapter 1, Introduction to Management 1. And also Introduction to Management 2, which talks about the theory. Okay, so you need to also know the theory of management. So it starts from a classical theory, ada scientific, ada administrative theory, ada human behavior theory. Okay, so you need to know also the theories juga. Okay, so you need to know who is saying what. So this person actually is talking about this theory tu tentang apa. So you need to know that. Okay, and then we have Maslow's theory juga, Maslow's hierarchy, kan? Until the end. Okay, so that will be introduction to management. So ada 2 parts to that. Okay, so the first part is management level, management skill, role of managers. So that will be the first part. Second is on the theory dan sebagainya. Okay, so that is chapter 1. Chapter 2 is basically history in project management. Okay, so history in project management talks about apa dalam tu? When it started, okay, official or formal project management. And then also we talk about project. Okay, so what is project? You need to identify project tu apa. Okay, so what does project mean? Trade-off. Okay, so in chapter 2, we talk about common trade-off. Okay, so you need to know the triangle or the trade-off in a project priority matrix, project life cycle. So that is in chapter 2. Okay, and then chapter 3, we talk about project management in Malaysia. So basically, we discuss a little bit about how construction contributes in Malaysia. Okay, so the low GDP, issues in Malaysian construction industry. Okay, so that is project management in Malaysia. And chapter 4, that was what we did in the last week, which is project definition. Okay, so if you can still recall, the outcome of project definition will be project charter. Okay, so project charter, before you can come up with project charter, ada several elements you need to input dalam project charter. So you need to know assumption tu apa, objective tu apa, or why do we need to have project charter. So you need to more or less know what is project definition and what's the function of that stage or that phase of project management. Okay, so project definition is the first phase of project management. Basically, that is the first thing we need to do. We need to define a project. Okay, so 4 chapters altogether. So it will not include construction planning. Okay, ke?
Okay, madam.
Alright, okay, then I expect the markah to be tinggi-tinggi lah. So, I tak nak lah tengok markah yang rendah-rendah. So, okay means the marks should be high. Okay, so if you have any question, nanti just get back to me if you have any questions. So, I think in terms of theoretical, I don't think you have any question lah. So, normally test 2 yang banyak question. Anyhow, all right. So I think we can end the class for today. Thank you for attending, and I'll see you all the next time I see you all.